Thank you. I am Meks. I use they, them pronouns. And yes, I work at Gridpoint as a software engineer. And fun fact, when I was at university, I studied biology before I turned to development. And that might become apparent as this talk continues. So I want you to imagine working on a feature for weeks. You've put a lot of time and effort into it. Your colleagues have done the code review and approved it, and you're excited to ship it. And you show it to product, just waiting for that satisfying, great job, this is exactly what we needed. And instead, product tells you, oh, wait, the requirements have changed, and we need you to redo it. Show of hands, have you ever built something that you're proud of, only to have to redo it and not see it shipped? Yeah, I'd say most of the engineers here have their hands up. It's a very common thing that happens in development, and it's not the developer's fault. It's just what happens when you have external factors and other people involved in the development cycle. This happened to me when I was working on a project at Gridpoint. I was tasked with building a fairly complicated multi-step form for a particular use case. And I went through this cycle of working hard, getting excited, ready to show it off, only to be told to redo it, not once, not twice, but 5 times. I went through a lot of intense emotions throughout this process. Frustration at having to rewrite the same code over and over again. I had doubt about my abilities and whether or not I was providing any value because I kept having to redo this thing. And a sense of defeatism and severe loss in motivation, and why keep bother trying when I wasn't doing it right. I learned a lot about building resilience throughout this process, not only in the code, but primarily in myself as an engineer. And I want to share with you all about these emotions and their impact at work. See what we can find by learning from the resiliency of trees to help us create new mindset shifts when we have these emotions, and what Elixir and Phoenix levers we can use to help us in creating these mindset shifts. The dictionary definition of resiliency is an ability to recover from or adjust easily to adversity or change. When I think of resiliency, I think of the trees in northern Minnesota. Here we have really intense winter storms with very strong winds, rain that turns to ice and sleet and snow. And the trees that survive the storms are the ones that have deep roots and are flexible, and their branches and trunks can actually bend with the wind. These trees, they don't get frustrated with the wind. They have no doubts about their worth as a tree, and they don't give in to defeat in the face of the storm. So that first feeling that I was feeling when going through all these rewrites was frustration. That sense of like, ugh, again, showing up to the computer and going through the same code. And it slows down the development cycle when you're having this attitude of not having excitement about what you're working on. And part of that is the friction of rework. It breaks cadence and drains momentum in your day to day. One way that trees build resilience is actually through a process called stress wood. When trees live in areas that have frequent winds in one direction, logic would indicate that the trees might grow in the direction with the wind. But actually, they have this ability to grow extra layers of growth to help them continue growing upwards towards the sun instead of leaning with the wind. And this is called stress wood. And these extra layers, it's not wasted effort, it's adaptive growth, turning stress into structure. A mindset shift that we can take on is appreciating that learning loop. And so instead of seeing it as, ugh, I have to do this again, It's an opportunity to view rework as strengthening our skill set. It's not only the outcome that matters, but each rewrite hones our skills and we become better engineers through the process. And there are a lot of tools that we have at our disposal that we can optimize to help that friction and that frustration and to make that rework less friction-laden. Elixir is a fun language to write in. There's an aspect of creativity, and you can solve problems in many different ways without having to stick to one expected approach. And it kind of feels like poetry. And so when you have a language that you enjoy writing in and look forward to and can develop in, rework can become a source of delight as a frustration. One of the things that I struggled with working on that really complex multi-step form is that when you have a requested change to, let's say, step 4 in that form, with live view, when you have a reload, anytime you save a change in your code, it's going to reload the entire page. And so if you're on step 4, you have to go through and fill out step 1, 2, 3 every time you make a small change. And this really sucks. It breaks cadence and it breaks your flow. And there are a few workarounds. You can hard code your state and your socket. You can write some JavaScript to automatically fill out the forms for you. But did you know that Phoenix actually supports hot loading? You can use the notify option in order to not lose state on your socket when working on these forms or anything in live view that has a complex set of state that you want when you're trying to actively develop on a particular portion of it. And I found this really helpful in keeping up my momentum and not breaking my cadence. Another important pattern that I found when working on this form with Phoenix was using the pattern of breaking each step into its own live component and backing those with ecto-embedded change schemas and change sets. And by creating each step to be more modular and independent, each iteration felt easier when I was asked to go back and make a change. Instead of viewing it as changing the whole form, I was able to see, I'm just focused on this one area and not having to worry about the other parts of the form. So when frustrated, we can emulate trees and put down layers of stress wood, embrace that learning loop. And with Elixir, we have that creativity and fun factor to look forward to every day. And we have tools at our disposal with Phoenix to help reduce that friction. That second feeling I was feeling after going through all these iterations was doubt. I was doubting my ability and my value as an engineer, and part of that was because I was using the lines of code that was shipped to production as proof of my value, the value of my work and my value as an engineer. And so when I had to go and remove large portions of what I'd done, I was slower and more hesitant to do so because I had this tie to it. Trees are not tied to their individual branches. In fact, they survive storms better when pruned because there's less for the wind to grab onto and drag. In fact, excess branches hinder their ability to rebalance and bend and shift as the wind comes through. We can cultivate resiliency and feel confident in our work when we see the value in deleting code to help us weather that storm of rapidly changing requirements. The compiler and dialyzer's type specs in Elixir can help us provide immediate feedback when we're going through and having to quickly delete large chunks of code. We get notified about unused aliases and import warnings, dangling function calls. And this helps with that iteration cycle and getting fast feedback. Another aspect that I found really important when feeling confident when making these code deletions is relying on fast tests. And Elixir does an excellent job with this. We have XUnit, which can run tests asynchronously, and the EctoSQL sandbox enables concurrent database tests without them clashing into each other. And so instead of waiting for minutes for the full test suite to run, it's only seconds. And when this process is that fast, it's a lot easier to confidently go in, delete code, alter and write tests, and iterate often. And that confidence extends to the interface. Live view testing of form validations, patches, and event handling can be handled in the same as your server code. It's in process and out of the box, which helps reduce the friction in removing and reshaping your UI code. Doubt comes from when we tie our value to the lines of code. But we are not the code we write, just as the trees are not the particular branch that broke in the storm. Removal is a healthy process both for trees and code. And Elixir and Phoenix can help us feel confident as we're going through deletion with its compile time checks and tests. The third feeling, and what was for me the hardest feeling, was defeatism. It's not an acute sting like frustration, but rather it's a slow drain from feeling isolated and alone in this process. And it prevented me from showing up and wanting to do my best work every day. But healthy forests are filled with trees that are not alone. In fact, the roots of trees interlace and intermingle beneath the soil, both with each other and with mycorrhizal fungi. And these amazing fungi move water and minerals and chemical signals from tree to tree as a form of communication to warn other trees of parasites. And when the wind blows, the trees act as buffers for each other. So no tree is getting the brunt of the full force of it. Defeatism came from this solitary mindset of it's my feature, my code, and it's my worth. But what's important is to measure progress as shared understanding. Can the rest of the team know what you're working on and understand the changes that are happening? What kind of momentum can you build with your colleagues? Because we don't have to weather the storm alone. One of the biggest advantages I see in working both with Elixir and Phoenix is because we have one unified language, we have unified collaboration. And since there's no translation layer between the front end and the back end of our code, we can seek assistance from any of our colleagues on any of the full stack teams. And they can jump in at any layer without this really heavy context switching tax. And that makes getting access to help easier. And beyond our companies and our personal projects, we have this generous network of people in the Elixir community. More than once when I was stuck on my multi-step forum, I turned to the Elixir forum, the Discord server, and the Slack channels to find solutions to similar problems that people have already talked about and discussed. I'm going to move on and skip that one for now. So the forest reminds us that resilience is relational. When that why bother creeps in and we're feeling alone and isolated, we can reach out and pair with our colleagues because we all speak Elixir from socket to schema. We can ask the community because we don't have to invent every answer. Progress becomes communal and visible in this way. So when you're rewriting code again and again, you can turn frustration into stresswood, doubt into pruning, and defeatism into collaboration with the forest. and let Elixir and Phoenix be your roots and your rings. Thank you.
Thank you for a great talk. We have about 4 minutes for questions. Do you have any questions? I will approach you with the mic. Nothing from the audience, so one question from me. Oh, okay.
I was still rephrasing the question. So, do you maybe have like a pointer to people struggling with the proudness of code and proud of the code itself and the struggle of knowing there's value in deletion, but you still, like basically treating your code as a pet, basically? This is something I struggled with a lot. Mm-hmm. Maybe some pointers on how to not see code as a pet and more as a, at what it is, code, like text on the screen.
What helps me a lot, especially with code deletion as part of the process, is remembering that the leaner the code is and the less code that exists, the fewer bugs that exist and that can happen, and the easier it is to maintain. And the less code, there is the me 6 months from now that goes in to look at the code, it's going to be easier to understand. So it's trying to step back and seeing it as like this one individual thing that you've created, and how does it fit into the whole, and how can I help both my future self and my colleagues.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so we still have time, so quick question from me. Of all the emotions that you've described here, which one would you pick as the one that was maybe most difficult to overcome or work with, and was there cooperation in your team to work on these, maybe not issues, but well, emotional problems?
Mm-hmm. I think doubt is one of the ones that I struggle with the most, since I came into software development not that long ago, just a few years, and so there's this doubt of like, am I good at my job? Am I good at this? And having colleagues that provide feedback, even if the code doesn't get shipped, having really positive code review experiences. So even if it doesn't get shipped, knowing that the code that I wrote, it was good and like would have done a fine job, really helps in instilling that confidence later on.
It's always good to have a support, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone? Okay, thank you.